Civil war ends with a march on Washington, but this is no peaceful protest. The climax of Alex Garland's latest film is a military assault on the American Capitol, from the streets of D.C. all the way to the White House where the fascist president, Nick Offerman, is still trying to hide. And through it all, our journalist protagonists Jesse, Lee, and Joel are trying to do their jobs. Jesse and Lee are busy snapping photos as they accompany soldiers of the Western forces, many of whom were played by real-life veterans, on their final attack. Once they reach the White House, the action is intercut with black and white images, as seen from Jesse's point of view, most of which were snapped by Speeney herself. The interesting parallels between Alex Garland's Civil War and 2020's American politics make it a compelling, if not intimidating. People may draw parallels between the trailers and the Washington, D.C. attack on January 6, 2021. Garland, however, avoids getting political because he wrote the script before to the uprising and instead concentrates on the function of the media. Reuters photojournalist Lee, portrayed by Kirsten Dunst, is looking for a significant interview and a photo shoot. She aims to take pictures of the president being overthrown by the rebels known as the Western Forces, who seek to restore democracy to the nation after it was put under dictatorship. During Lee's journey alongside her peers, Garland focuses on themes of compassion, responsibility, and sacrifice for journalists, instead of providing a brutal indictment of the world's perpetual war machine and its despots. Joel, a co-worker, and Sammy, a mentor, make up Lee's team. Along the journey, they meet young Jesse, who looks up to Lee and wants to use her photography to transform the world. They absorb the harm caused during the journey. It makes sense that Jesse will always aspire to be like her hero after Lee saved her from a bombing in the first act. Regretfully, nationalists who have been murdering civilians intercept them as they travel around to Virginia. Jesse Plemons from Breaking Bad, who also happens to be Dunst's spouse, plays the lead soldier. He makes it obvious that he is all about the American first mentality by killing two of the team's fellow journalists. Since he believes that both Asian journalists are foreigners, he believes that he is a true patriot. This leaves a scar on Jesse because Lee had earlier warned her that working as a war reporter required them to become impartial, heartless, and cold. Nevertheless, the 23-year-old finds this encounter to be too personal. Sammy crashes the Jeep into the enemy just as it looks like the press is going to be killed, gathers his comrades, and runs away. Sadly, Sammy gets shot as they manage to get away from the gunshots. He is mortally wounded and dies en route to the camp of the Western forces. Jesse is heartbroken by this. Lee is hurt to watch her have PTSD because she has also been battling it for years after witnessing the murder of men, women, and children all around the world. Joel is particularly irritated since he has recently learned that the president's soldiers are prepared to surrender him after arranging agreements. Since more media people have joined the entourage while the Western forces prepare for the trip, he believes Sammy's death was in vain. Joel only wanted the inside scoop, but now that he knows the truth, he will have to tell everyone about it, a concept also present in Jake Gyllenhaal's Nightcrawler. It is a veritable carnage in Washington when the media arrive. The president's forces are being killed, government employees are being butchered, and the Western forces are ignoring their own massive fatalities. When Washington and America are free, collateral harm becomes meaningless. It's unclear who the fascist movement has supported during this conflict and whether the government has actually been repressive. After all, Texas, really conservative, and California, typically liberal, make up the Western forces. While some rebels act as though they are domestic terrorists, others in the same uniform seem to have the best interests of the country at heart. The fact that the president is being chastised for using drone strikes also gives a bow to Barack Obama, which further blurs the distinctions between the two presidents. It is evident that both the government and the rebel militia will do everything it takes to overthrow the other. The president's bodyguards put up a fierce fight when the Western forces invade the White House. During a few seconds of a ceasefire, Jesse steps out to take a photo of the hallway, only for a guard to fire at her. Shockingly, Lee shoves her out the way and gets shot. Just before this happens, Jesse aims her lens at her mentor, capturing the death. It's a brutal moment, because Lee trained Jesse for this. Lee even indicated one time when they were photographing rebels torturing prisoners that if Jesse died, it was her duty to snap the incident. Tragedy or not, they film and let the world judge for themselves. But Lee cracked her own code. She was motivated by her feelings to save Jesse. She recognized herself in Jesse, that's why. In addition to being driven, both of their families were happy to watch TV at home and do nothing as the country burned. Instead of comfort zones, they believed in changing things. It illustrates the influence of female journalists and how many of them light up the planet. After getting to know each other so well, Lee began to think of Jessie as a sister, which is why she makes the significant sacrifice in this post-apocalyptic American society. At this point, Jessie manages to retain her humanity as well because her capture of Lee is purely reflexive. It's not as if she planned, observed her death, and then staged the picture. The fixation of Jessie and Joel on hurrying the Legion to the president's office alludes to how swiftly these events actually transpire in real life. They do not stop to grieve for Lee. Grief, compassion, or empathy are futile. They have to obtain the exclusive in remembrance of the departed. When the rebels storm the Oval Office, they find the president hiding under his desk. They drag him out, but before he can be executed, Joel asks for a minute. He doesn't want an interview anymore, but he let it quote. The president begs Joel not to let them kill him. A short quote Joel cheekily accepts. The president's aide did ask for a trial and some sort of immunity when she was negotiating terms moments before. The fact she was shot dead in seconds more or less foreshadowed it would go one way in this bloody ending. Joel steps back as the soldiers pump the president full of bullets. Of course, Jessie snaps it all. The price to pay was steep, but she gets the stills that Lee and Sammy would have been proud of. As the credits roll, the soldiers are seen with the corpse, nodding to so many real-world wars, even on a grounded level with gangs and cartels, where cops and law enforcement pose with their targets. But privacy isn't something most journalists consider. Everything is on the record, all the time. This isn't sensationalism. It's the principle of what news is based on. Or at least, this is the precept Lee's crew runs on, and what they pass down to Jessie. It is noteworthy that Joel also achieves his desire. He talked about the surge of excitement these professions provide the entire movie. Because it has become so personal, he gets added satisfaction from watching the president die. Here, he participates in the activity rather than only recording it. With all the blood that has been shed, Joel can't help but smile as he watches this politician die. One of the most intense action films ever ends with this. In the end, Garland's portrayal tends to focus on Western journalists who report about foreign governments collapsing and whether or not they are compromised while doing so. Here, it's their own territory under threat. As the violent coup ends, one has to wonder if the destruction was worth it for these journalists.